And we are live. Welcome back to the Hoplite channel. Once again, I am your host. Appreciate for the newcomers clicking on the channel. If you're new here, we're covering topics of Stoicism. Right now we're in the middle of the Titans of Stoicism series. If you want to go back to the beginning, start with Seneca. We'll go further back and go to the Stoicism Primer series. That'll bring you up to speed to where we are. But for everybody returning, thanks again for clicking on Epictetus Part 2. We're going to pick up where we left off. And as I said in the last video, I'm going to describe more about Epictetus personally, his view of Stoic philosophy, and what imprint he left on the philosophy that may have been different from others, but I thought that part 2 would be dedicated more to the man himself. We will still read from the Discourses, a few passages, but I felt like maybe a little more background on his philosophy as it pertained to his life. So if we think about it, like what was the arc of his life as far as things that happened to him and the way he may have adopted Stoicism as a means of dealing with his life? Well, we know he was born into slavery, right? And then he secured his freedom either by luck or by some other means. But Emperor Nero died. The person who he belonged to, Epictetus, freed him. But then even after that freedom, that was short-lived. He was a philosopher in Rome, teaching in Rome, and then Domitian banishes all the philosophers from the city. But then a new page is turned, and he's allowed to seek his own Stoic philosophy school in Greece, in Nicopolis, and he becomes a master. He becomes, a Titan. He becomes a Jedi master in his own right. Does that story sound familiar? A little bit of an arc there. Freedom, banishment, mastery. He becomes not a hermit, but he has his own school, and the crowds come to him to learn Stoicism. So, what were the big points though that he tried to convey to his pupils? And what were the main factors of Stoicism in life that made the biggest impact on him and what he felt was his duty to teach foremost? Well, one, we say actions are motivated by thoughts, and those actions are up to us. He definitely has this recurring theme in his work where he says your actions are motivated by thought, and that it's entirely up to you. What you decide to do in life is your decision alone. You can be forced into something, but if that decision is taken away, well then how you react to the new way of life, as in slavery, those decisions in that frame of life are still yours. What if you're freed? No different. The thoughts you have move into your actions, and now you're a freed man instead of a slave, but it's still your responsibility. It's your duty to come up with your own thoughts. And as we know as a Stoic, virtue should be in your thoughts and especially in your deeds. And then if you're banished, well, it's kind of like slavery, except instead of being kept in, you are forced out. But by being forced out, he was allowed to become a master in that phase of life. So as long as your actions are motivated by virtue and your thoughts are up to you, you are still the master of this domain no matter where you go. And that's a great lesson to take with you as a Stoic, is that no matter where you go, as long as you bring this along with you, this is where your freedom lies. Marcus Aurelius will go into that in more detail as we cover him, but this is everything, right? If you have this and it's stronger than what you're subjected to, you will overcome it. And your emotions, again, will take a back seat, and your logic and your reason will give you purpose. So, and he had a second point, that everything that is not up to us, which is the idea 4 as we covered in the primer, is up to God, or as he would say, Zeus, the lightning bringer, the thunder maker. If you decided one day that you were not going to carry on with your life, that was still your decision. But if one day you wanted to carry on with life and found out that you couldn't, well, this was now God's decision. This was Zeus saying to you, I know what you want, but this is what is going to happen. This is my plan. And in a lot of ways, Christianity is similar in that. And they say, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Well, the Greeks thought the gods were no different. That, well, whatever the gods had in store for you, despite what you may want, is not up to you. Therefore, you just need to accept it. And that's one of the foundations of Stoic thought is you need to take life as it comes to you when it comes to you. And if Zeus decides that he's going to throw you a curveball, then you just have to, you have to roll with it. Right. So this last point, this one is a little more convoluted, but it's still relevant. And I think this distinguishes Epictetus from some of the other philosophers in that we say that, virtue is the only good, right? But virtue for virtue's sake should never be greater than virtue as a way of living. What good is virtue if it's not put into practice? We'll cover that in the primer. What good are thoughts if they are endorsing virtue, but they don't progress past that endorsement? That endorsement does not become physical action. What good is it to say honesty is good, but to still do dishonest things? So as an example, we say, fatherhood is perhaps this phase of life that people consider virtuous. You read a story in the newspaper, and let's say, just example, Joe Johnson passed away today. And what does that story usually say? Joe Johnson, 57 years old, father of 5. The story, the media wants you to juxtapose this state of fatherhood against the fatherly virtues. It wants you to assume that fatherhood is also congruent and similar to the virtues we associate with fatherhood, which are honesty, wisdom, consideration, things we expect a good father to be. But that's not necessarily true, right? There are plenty of people who are fathers that probably shouldn't be. There are plenty of people who are mothers that probably shouldn't be. Just because you are now in the phase of fatherhood does not mean that this itself is virtuous. So he said that what we prefer, which could be fatherhood, should never be greater than what is truly valuable. So your fatherhood, if that is a phase of your life, should never become superior to the fatherly virtues. So if you have to give up honesty, wisdom, and consideration in exchange for just simple fatherhood, that's not a good trade. Virtue, for virtue's sake, that's fine. People can confuse the two, but never let virtue as a way of living escape your thoughts. That is paramount to being a Stoic. Virtuous thoughts, good. Virtuous actions, better. Okay, so how do we do this? There's 4 steps here. Human action is the path of virtue. Right? We say that human action is what you have to do to walk the path of virtue. And to do so, you must learn what is virtuous and then use those virtues to lay the bricks on your path in life. But we cannot forget that we're humans. We're not Zeus. We're fallible. We're fallible. So if we are laying our own bricks to lead a virtuous life, we're going to misplace bricks or we're going to forget bricks. Our road is going to be sometimes crooked or cracked, or it will be uneven. So you must practice to lay those bricks. You must work hard to remember virtues and to make sure your path stays virtuous, but you can't forget you're fallible. So to practice, you must practice to make perfect. And I put perfect in quotations because, again, we are not Zeus, we're not God. But without practice, without working on laying those bricks evenly and level so that we have a nice level path to walk a virtue, we will never get good at it. What's an example besides walking a path? We could say human action is akin to sailing. By the way, this sailboat, that took me 5 minutes to draw. I just wanted you to know that I'm working hard for the channel. 5 minutes to draw a boat. So human action is sailing, right? You are a sailboat, and you are on the waters of life, the oceans of the world. And where do you want to go? Well, you want to go where happiness is. That's the final destination. That's home of everybody, that's what a Stoic seeks, is contentment, is happiness, peace of mind. Well, how do we get there? It's like, well, we have to sail because we're not going to get there standing still. But virtue is our compass to finding home, right? So if we have this compass, we can navigate the waters of life. And we must use virtue as our compass, because anything else, a Stoic would tell you, is not good. And if virtue is the only good, virtue is the only decent compass. You must always check your compass. You must always practice. So if you and I are at sea and you have the helm and I go to bed for the night and I wake up in the morning and I say, oh, okay, where are we at? What's the heading? And you say, oh, I think we're north by northeast. And I look up and I can't, I have no reference of landmarks. And I say, well, when did you check the compass? And you're, I think I checked it around 2 a.m. And I look at my watch and it's 8 a.m. You haven't checked the compass in 6 hours. We could be degrees off course. We could be literally going back in the wrong direction that we just came from. So you have to always check your compass. You must always check your virtue if you ever hope to find home. If you just let the wind take you and blow you about, you'll be lost. Not unlike how Odysseus was tossed on the Aegean Sea in the Odyssey. Although he got lost because he was too proud. He told the gods that he sacked Troy. It was his idea that enabled the Greeks to conquer Troy, and he didn't need the gods. The gods were inferior to him because he did everything on his own. Well, the gods had other plans for him, and Poseidon in particular cursed him to wander and aimlessly wander the seas for 12 years, and he lost men by the dozens, and he suffered because of this vanity, this pride. But every time he got back in the ship, he had to check his compass. Which way is Ithaca? Okay, set the coordinates, back on course. And if he was blown off course, and maybe he went to an island where a cyclops killed a bunch of his guys, or maybe he went to another island and met some chick named Calypso, and they fooled around for a couple years. Whatever. He got back in his boat though and checked his heading. Okay, Ithaca, that way. He had to get into the ship and check his compass each time to make sure that he was still on track to get to where he wanted to go. He knew he couldn't rely on the winds, and he knew there was a god who was vengeful that wanted to get even with him and was going to blow him off course. So practice. Check your compass. Always check your compass. Make sure your heading is on home to happiness, and sail. Okay, so we'll read a couple more passages from the Discourses to hammer some of these points home. I will provide a read-along yet again so that you can follow with me as I read. So the first one, we go to, this is Book 2, Chapter 1, page 77. And this is from the chapter entitled, That There Is No Conflict Between Confidence and Caution. All right, he begins. What then is the fruit of these doctrines? Whatever must be noblest and most becoming for those who are being properly educated, tranquility, fearlessness, freedom. For on these matters we should not trust the multitude who say that none ought to be educated but the free, but rather to philosophers who say that the educated alone are free. Okay, so what is he saying there? He's saying that, for these matters we should not trust the multitude who say that none ought to be educated but the free, but rather to philosophers who say that the educated alone are free. This is going back to the compass, right? So if you learn virtue and you learn the difference between what is virtuous and what is not virtuous, you will lay good stones for your path. You will have a good compass to set sail. You will be free in a sense that your ship, no matter what the multitudes say, will be on the right heading because you will have given yourself the knowledge to make yourself free. Epictetus knew that what slavery, the life of slavery was like. And then he also knew that his first taste of freedom was indeed education, as he studied under Rufus. And then when his real freedom came, as far as the physical sense, he was free to do both. But he knew that educating his mind prior to his freedom was his real taste of freedom for the first time. Okay. Second reading, we go to Book 2, Chapter 25, page 145. And this is from the chapter entitled, How is Logic Necessary? This one's brief. He says, you see how you yourself admit that logic is necessary, since without it you cannot even determine whether it is necessary or not. Okay, again, that one is kind of cryptic, a little bit of a it's a great quote when you sit down and think about it, but it sounds confusing when you just read it and don't try to absorb it. What he's trying to say is that logic is necessary because you can't even figure out whether or not you need logic if you don't use logic. So logic is something in and of itself that demonstrates its presence, its necessity, simply by asking you, is logic necessary or no? And logic, as we said in the earlier videos, the logos, that teaches you the balance between the worlds of what you can't control and what you can, things outside and within. So logic is, of course, necessary. And he uses that small quote right there to demonstrate the point that without it, you are a ship without a compass. Because if you can't use your reason to deduce what is virtuous and not virtuous, you can't possibly have a decent compass that will show you the right way to go home to happiness. All right, last one for this video. We go to book 3, chapter 9, page 170. This is under the title of the chapter 9, To a Rhetorician. All right, he says, to you, all you have appears little. To me, all I have appears great. Your desire is unsatiable. Mine has been satisfied. When children thrust their hands into a narrow-necked jar and try to get nuts and figs out, the same thing happens. If a child fills his hand, he cannot get it out, and then breaks into tears. Drop a few of them, and you will get it out. You too should drop your desire. Do not covet many things, and you will get what you want. All right, so this is again, he's using the analogy of a child who knows that there's something in this, in the cookie jar. He uses the figs and nuts, and the child wants those sweet, tasty things. So he stuffs his hand down the jar, and like a child figures, well, I'll just grab everything I can get a hold of, because why wouldn't I? That's all I want. And grabs a handful of the figs and nuts, but realizes that he can't get his hand out of the narrow opening of the jar with what he's holding. And so Epictetus says to him, this is the same way you are living your life. You are the kid with his hand in the jar. If you just let some of those things go, a few figs, maybe a few nuts, you will have enough room to get your hand in between the narrow opening of the jar, and you will still have figs and nuts to savor. But you can't have it all at once. You can't pull your hand out of the jar and have everything you want in the same motion. This is an interesting passage, because I was told a story by someone who said in India, I believe, or Africa perhaps, that's how they actually catch monkeys. They will put bananas in clear jars and tie these bananas down with a stake. And they'll come along afterwards and they'll find a monkey with his hand down in the jar, still wrapped around the banana. And they'll scoop him up and they'll take him away. The monkey wants that banana so badly. He sees the hunters coming to pick him up, and he still either can't put it together that it's the banana that's holding him hostage. It's not the jar. It's the fact that he can't let go of the banana. He wants it so badly. He's willing to sit there and think, oh, you guys are here? Okay, do I still get to keep the banana? If he would just let the banana go, he could scamper up that tree and avoid being caught. But like the child, he doesn't have it within him to reason with his desires and his predicament and say, well, you've gotten yourself into this. You can get yourself out. Just let the banana go, right? And that's a lesson for all of us, is that sometimes when you're not getting what you want, perhaps it's because you're asking for too much. Perhaps that, your compass is telling you you should go this way, despite the fact you may want to go that way. Listen to your compass. Let go of the banana. Let go of the nuts and the figs. Maybe you don't have to let go of all of them, but you can't keep all of them. And if you are smart enough to let these things go, to separate what is outside your control and within your control, you can make it to happiness. And the virtue of being able to tell yourself no when you need to hear it is essential to being a Stoic. Yeah, for sure. Okay, that is Epictetus part 2. I apologize if I kept saying Seneca halfway through the vid, because the Seneca, Epictetus, he's still on my mind too. I'm reading both books interchangeably, so apologize for that. But this is Epictetus part 2. We will move on to Epictetus part 3. I figured, I did 3 for Seneca. It's only fair I do 3 for Epictetus. Once again, thanks for stopping by. I hope you're getting something out of this. It's cathartic for me being on lockdown, so I appreciate you coming by to hear me speak on these things. If you like it, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you really like it, share it if you think someone else would enjoy it, and we will see you for the next one. Till then, take it easy.